Hello, adventuresses! In today's episode, we speak to Karen from Scotland, who went on an amazing adventure with her deaf dog and her troublesome horse across 13 islands, completely unsupported. She shares how her crazy rescue horse was actually downright dangerous, and it was actually suggested by a vet to have her put down when Karen came up with the idea at this last attempt to win her horse over. We talk about her book, The Deaf, the Daft and the Ditsy, and how she raised £6,500 for charity, all thanks to her story about her travels with her horse. So, stay tuned for today's episode, because if you love happy endings, you're not going to want to miss this. Before we get started, I want to mention our Equestrian Adventuresses Fund. I'm happy to announce that this month we've raised, thanks to our listeners, $50 to put towards our EQA fund, where our mission is to get women in the saddle. Unfortunately, in many countries, horse riding is still seen as a male-dominated sport. So, with this month's money, we are asking our listeners to send us their nominations for women and girls who could use the money for riding lessons or educational horse books or anything just like this. So please, if you know someone you want to nominate, or if you want to contribute for next month's fundraiser, please check out our Patreon page and find out how you can support Equestrian Adventuresses and get more women around the world in the saddle. Also, anytime you shop on the EQA website, whether it's buying our silver jewelry or one of our online video courses, a percentage of the profits automatically go towards the EQA fund, so don't worry, you can shop away totally guilt-free. To find out about our Patreon or to shop on Equestrian Adventuresses, check out our website. It's very easy. You can find the shop button, or you can also find the button which says Premium Members. So it's equestrianadventuresses.com. And hit it! We are explorers. We are trailblazers. We love to do what cannot be done. We love to test our limits, cross borders, and we love the freedom horses bring us. We seek lands without fences. Who are we? We are Equestrian Adventuresses. We are a community of women who love horses, travel, and adventure.
To infinity and beyond!
And now your host, Crystal Kelly.
Hello, adventuresses, and I'm talking to Karen today. And so first of all, I read your book, The Deaf, the Daft and the Ditsy. Yes. And it was quite fun to read, especially because you did this grand adventure unsupported in Scotland. But before we, start talking about that, I just wanted to say hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And tell me a little bit, let's backtrack some. So how did you get into horses, and also how did you go from, being a horse lover like the rest of us into let's have grand adventures with my horse?
Yeah, so I was lucky when I was a kid. We moved to the country, to the countryside when I was about 5. And neighbours had a couple of ponies, so like any young girl, I spent my days in wellies and, begging for rides and things. And then eventually for £100, I bought my first pony with all my life savings at that time, when I was maybe about 11 or 12, I guess. And I had 3 horses over the next few years. Kind of, you go up the heights, obviously. You unfortunately grow out of the little tiny Welsh ponies. And then when I was 17, unfortunately, I had an accident. Amazingly, not horse related, because obviously we all fall off. And I broke my neck. So,
that's a serious one.
Yeah, it was a little bit. Very lucky, no spinal damage, but a fracture. And so 9 months with a neck brace and flatten your back for the first month and things. So unfortunately my pony was loaned out, and after about a year I still had quite major issues with my neck, and people that had her on loan bought her, and that was kind of the last of horse riding for about about 20 years. I always did still ride, so I stayed with a friend for a while and exercised her ponies, and I'd go on the odd hack with, friends and things. But didn't own one. And then, about 7 years ago, I bought an old property, and it was really run down, and it took me 4 years of living like in complete dust and dirt and no heating and squalor to do it up. And at the end of it, I thought, you know what, I'm going to reward myself and I'm going to get a horse. I think horses had always been in my blood. And so at the age of, like 41, I got a horse, and all my animals have always been rescues. So I've always had dogs and cats and things. So went to a rescue place down in England, and for £300 picked up Connie, who was then a 10-year-old standard bred coloured mare, who'd come from Ireland over the ferry with her foal at foot, and was told that she was rideable and was very, okay, no issues. She hadn't been ridden for about 2 years when I went to see her, so, not fair just to jump on her, but she had a kind eye, and she wasn't in very good living conditions. So she was in a tiny field, and I mean like tiny, with two of the horses. There was mud up to her knees. She was bullied terribly. Her mane was matted, and she was just miserable. So the next day I bought a horse box and drove her home, which took about 7 hours. And thought, gave her, a few weeks to settle in, did some work with her, did some groundwork with her, took her for lots of dog walks, and it seemed to be going okay. She was quite gentle, very gentle with my dog, and my dog Pip is deaf, completely deaf. And things seemed to start okay. Jumped on her one day, didn't have any issues. And then maybe about 3 or 4 months into having her and getting her fit and starting doing more things, she started to rear, and it initially started to just be small, kind of up in the back legs, just a little bit off the ground, until eventually it developed to full on up in the air. She flipped once and she started biting really badly. She would take chunks out of you for no apparent reason. So I started reading a lot, looking at a lot of kind of natural horsemen people out there. Watched every single YouTube video I could watch, and I still couldn't kind of find out what was going on. And so got her back checked by the vet, got her teeth done, got the saddle fitted. The vet took blood samples twice. He scanned her ovaries. So my little £300 rescue pony by this stage is like £2,000 I've spent on her. And no one could find out anything physically wrong with her. On the second time at the vet, she bit him. She took a chunk out of him. She broke my ribs twice in 18 months. So the first time wasn't really her fault. She did slip and fell and caught me underneath her. So that was a mountain rescue job and a couple of days in hospital. The second time was very deliberate. She double barreled me with her back end and caught me in the ribs, breaking them again. And she would so I'd go down to the field. I would sit in the field with a pot of tea. I love my tea. And just sit with a book, not go up to her or anything. She would wander over, inquisitive, come and say hello, and then just take a chunk out of you. So I even got some horse behaviouralists in to see her, and a kind of a horse whisperer, who, when she visited, Connie was actually in a little corral in my garden, and rearing and rearing and rearing, and the woman actually asked if it was safe to work with her. So that's how bad it was. She would take these tantrums that could last for hours, and it was almost like she was blinded to you. She would literally run you over, like she couldn't see you. I used to say it was like a kid in a sweetie shop, like having, thrown itself on the floor, kicking and screaming.
So you, as you said, you're in your 40s. You have been out of horses for a while. You think you're going to do this really nice thing to a poor little rescued horse, and then, it's probably your worst nightmare, I could imagine, and you just want to help her, and, obviously there's something in her past which is causing a lot of whiplash, let's say, but how did you feel? I can imagine the frustration of you just wanted to have a horse and have fun and get into horses, and, this sort of thing happens, you're getting injured, but somehow you stick with it, and you must have had some kind of feeling about Connie specifically that made you continue trying to figure out, okay, what's going on. So just tell me a little bit, like, what's going in your head, are you...
Yeah, so, oh my God, there was definitely days, there was lots of tears. There were days where I would write to any person that I knew in the equestrian world that I respected, pleading for help.
But why not do the obvious thing and, I don't know, get a horse that all the buttons work, and do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, what do you do with the one you have then? So it's dangerous and completely immoral to hand her on to somebody else to sell her. She's only 10, so she could be a field ornament for a long time. There were definite times where she could be lovely, and the really strange thing is at the time my neighbour had grandkids who were about maybe 8 and 11, and they had ponies, so they were kind of horse savvy, but just little kids. And they would come and like pleat her mane and her tail and put ribbons in her, and she would stand completely still and let them do it. But yet, when an adult went to do something with her, even completely unprovoked, she would take a bite out of them. So I could see that there was something there, and a lot of horses come from Ireland and they're not well treated. She had a real fear of anything that resembled a stick. And I felt responsible that I'd taken on this rescue animal, and, other than giving her away to somebody and then have the possibility of them hurting them or her ending up just getting put down. So the second time I went to the vet did recommend having her put down. She'd injured me a number of times. I'd been in hospital a number of times. And the only thing I thought left to do to try and kind of, bond with her was to take her somewhere where she didn't know. She didn't know anybody else. She had no idea where she was. And the only the only routine thing in her day after day, would be me and Pip. So she adored Pip. She would follow Pip. And the two of them got on really well. But it was definitely an adult human kind of thing that she had going on. So, I did say a few times that if I could have found somebody that would have taken her on and worked with her in a non-aggressive way, I would have given her to them, because I felt that I was lacking somehow in my own knowledge and experience. But people came and saw her and said, "You're doing what we would do, and we can't give you any more advice or information." So that's when I ended up going to the Hebrides of Scotland and doing our trip.
Yes, and this is sort of the start of your book, which I think is a great story, and we'll definitely get into your book. But I guess, I don't know, before we talk more about what happens with you and Connie on your adventure, how does this kind of idea come up? You must have had this idea of horse travel before. Because, I don't know, I think a normal person sitting with let's call it a crazy horse, is not going to say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and and ride across across Scotland in the wilds, unsupported, and see if we both survive.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some madness there, I'm sure.
So where did this sort of idea of, I don't know, adventures and travel with horses come?
Yeah. So I've been really lucky in that I am a qualified mountain leader, which has meant that I spent a number of years working overseas, leading groups of people up mountains and through mountains, and lucky to ride in Mongolia for a month and do some amazing things. So always had a real kind of adventurous spirit. And Pip, who I'd got as a little 16-week-old puppy from a rescue centre, has always been my kind of adventure buddy. She's always been really game, and we've walked across Scotland, we've done long distance trails together, we've cycled some of the islands together and camped. But I think she was 12 and 11 when we went to the Hebrides 2 years ago, and she got a little bit of arthritis in her back and one of her paws, and her days of kind of running day after day beside the bike with me and the panniers were coming to an end. But she'd always, when I did, try and go on hacks with Connie, she would obviously always come. Although she's deaf, she is amazingly trained, so she doesn't chase anything on the road. She either sticks behind Connie if she sees a car, she jumps into the verge and things. So she's a great companion. And so I kind of got Connie and planned to do some happy hacking and things. And I think it was aided by a glass of or two of wine one night that I was just at my wit's end. I was absolutely at my wit's end. I'd spent all this money. Nobody gave me any inclination at all what was wrong with her. And I just thought I have to be with her 24/7, somewhere that she doesn't know, so I can't do it at home. I can't just go and camp in the fields. So I decided to go and take her somewhere. I'd never been to the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. There's a number of islands which I'd always wanted to visit. And so I thought I would go there, and I only booked the initial ferry across to the islands because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And the vet, when I told him what I was doing, did give me 2 syringes of sedative, not for me but for the horse, as a backup, either for my own safety or for her safety, because she would take these complete blind kind of tantrums. So that's kind of how I ended up going across. My poor mum and a couple of friends did completely question my sanity, and I totally understand and respect them for that, but it was my last ditch attempt to try and reach her. And I love travel, I love camping, I love Scotland, so that's how it kind of all came together.
And I think it's a really amazing point that you make, because a lot of people, travel is like a new trendy thing now, but travel has been around for ages, but it is transformative, it is healing. The more that I travel, the more I learn and grow. And, I love this idea of yours that, well, if travel for myself can heal myself, why couldn't it maybe heal, my horse, my relationship with my horse? So,
yep.
I really, really think that that's a strong message. So have you have this kind of idea, this last attempt, like you said, it's this or nothing, because no one wanted to help her. So yep. What was your rough plan, or did you have a plan when you, like you said, you booked the ferry, but what was your goal or idea, or did you have a return ticket? I don't know. What was your plan?
I had a month off work. I was going self-supported, unsupported. I didn't want to have to rely on anybody. I didn't want to let anybody down if it did go, if it didn't happen and there was some reason why we couldn't continue. I didn't book any accommodation or anything. I wanted to be self-reliant. So I wanted to be able to stop on a nice day whenever I wanted, or to carry on, or on a horrible day just to stay in the tent and hide out the rain. So I wanted just to be as kind of basic as possible. So I ride Connie without a bit. She's bitless. She's also barefoot, so we just have boots on. And she's treeless as well, in a treeless saddle. So I just wanted to go right back to basics and just to rely on ourselves. I didn't want to try and book accommodation to stay in because I didn't know where I'd be on certain days, but I also wanted it for us to camp in the wild as much as possible, so that she only knew me and Pip, and hopefully that would kind of make the bond better between us. So the only plan was to go across, to go right down to the south, to a small island called Battersea, and to then turn around and head north and see what happened. So it was just quite a basic plan of action.
And tell me, so, you said you have this, what is it exactly? What is your
Mountain Leadership Awards. It means
Mountain
I'm
leadership. What is
qualified to
this?
take. Yeah, so it's a British thing that qualifies you. So it's like a week's training, a week assessment. It makes you qualified to take people into the mountains and camp and navigate and use rope work and things like that. So I'm really happy by myself, really happy camping, really happy navigating and things. So that was, done.
Yeah. So you're a tough cookie. For someone like me who I can't survive in the wild, definitely. Tell us a little bit about Scotland as far as what kind of obstacles, as an expert that you are, did you know was ahead of you? So, for example, weather conditions in Scotland. We all know it's rainy, but what kind of terrain are you going to be facing? What kind of weather? What type of problems or issues did you already know as this kind of experienced person that helped prepare you for this trip? Or what's someone like me who knows nothing? What can I learn from you? That's what I want to know.
Okay, so you definitely need midgie repellent. So we all know about the Scottish midgie, which is this tiny, tiny little insect that you can't see but causes absolute havoc with your life. So they're like mosquitoes, but tinier and more vicious and horrible. So that's your probably number one battle in Scotland. The Hebrides was actually really windy, so we didn't get bothered with midges too much. But it meant that you then got to try and find shelter. I just took a little one-man tent, so it was quite small. But even so, sometimes it's so windy on the headlands that you still had to try and find like a kind of craggy bit or a little kind of dip, so you're out of the weather, out of the wind rather. The other thing, especially about the Hebrides, but in the Highlands of Scotland as well, is bogs. And I'd actually done a lot of reading and read some real horror stories about horses getting stuck in bogs and just not being able to get them back out again. So I'd read quite a few accounts of years gone by when the doctor used to go visit him with his horse and gig, and horses getting stuck in the shifting sands on the Hebrides, and then them just basically having to abandon the horse and cart, and then the tide coming in and drowning them. So I was really, really concerned about bogs out there. So when I was going kind of quite remotely, I would always ask some local people what the tracks and things were like. So I always had that in mind. With other things is just, I try to keep it as simple as possible. So I was riding Connie about half the time and led her about half the time. So I was always aware that she was carrying me plus, all of her equipment as well. I tried to carry about 4 or 5 days food in the knowledge that I'd then come to a village or something and managed to kind of stock up food there. I didn't carry any food for Connie. We just stopped every day at lunchtime. I'd take everything off. She would graze for an hour, and then obviously at night we'd just find a kind of corral with enough grass and water as well. Just kind of filled up out the streams and things. In Scotland, there's always plenty of streams because of all the rain, so that wasn't much of a concern. And again, didn't carry a bucket, so she wouldn't necessarily have water overnight, but we'd just find it in the morning and things. Or I'd take her before kind of going to bed to a stream, and she'd learn. She was always a terrible drinker. She was always really fussy, but the trip certainly taught her that she just had to make the most of whatever water we found en route and things. So I just tried to keep it quite simple. And I guess that was just part of our plan, was to travel as simply as possibly and quietly as a little group of 3 and just see what happened, really.
And so you touched a little bit on the gear that you were bringing. Is there any, I don't know, lessons learned from this trip, or things that you packed that you actually didn't use, or things that you wish you had? Or what kind of gear were you bringing, and what would you recommend for people?
Yeah, so I did I did one short trip with her beforehand as a practice, and that's actually the trip where she broke my ribs. So I still went, which is even crazy, after that attempt. So at the end of that trip, with broken ribs, I sat on the floor and went through all my kit, and any kit that I hadn't used, I put to one side and then went through it and thought, right, do I need to take it the next time? And there's always things like first aid kits that you're always going to take and you hope you never ever use, but you still have to take it. But no, we had a little one-man tent, a little sleeping bag. It was still quite warm in August over in the Hebrides, a little inflatable mattress, and then first aid kit for me and for the dog and for Connie as well. And then we just had a tiny little camping stove, and our gas cylinder and just really lightweight food. So survived mostly on just like porridge sachets for the morning, and then lunchtime was usually like crackers and cheese and oat cakes, and then at night it was the dried pasta. So yeah, never lost any weight, unfortunately, because it was all carbs. But certainly managed to keep me going. I did take a rug for Connie, a lightweight rug, because it is Scotland, and certainly the Hebrides, even just the wind sometimes. And I'm really glad I did take that. She wore it most nights. I was there in total 21 days, and it ended up raining at some point for 19 of them. So, she has a standard bred. She's quite thin-skinned, and even with the rug on, sometimes she got a bit damp and miserable. So I'm really glad that I took that. But I don't think there was anything that I wouldn't have taken again. I only had 2 pairs of pants and socks and things like that. So I'd always try and dry them off. I'd usually attach them to the saddle if it wasn't raining during the day to dry them off. But there was a few kind of soggy nights. I think I had 2 showers in the duration when I stayed at a youth hostel. So I guess I got pretty smelly, but when you're traveling by yourself, it doesn't really matter. The dog doesn't seem to mind. So yeah.
So you just mentioned, you tried a practice trip and it failed and you broke your ribs.
Yeah.
And here you are loading up your horse and doing this even more. I mean, I don't know how far you were away from home in that first trip where you broke your ribs. But, you're kind of going on some islands, and I don't know how easily accessible hospitals are. So you're driving there to these islands with your horse in the horse box, and your dog is next to you. What's going through your brain?
I tried to just keep an open mind. My friend very kindly came over for the first 3 days. So I had somebody to kind of bounce off for the first few days, which was nice. And because I hadn't booked anything, I think I wasn't letting anyone down. The only thing I was aware of is I was chair of a local Riding for Disabled group at the time. And we were always of like any kind of charity needing money. So I had said I would fundraise for them. So that was my only kind of thing, is that if I was fundraising and people were giving money and then I had to pull out, I would kind of feel guilty about that. But I just tried to have just almost no expectations. My hope was that Connie would just slowly realise that, she could trust me, that I was part of her herd, and bond with us. But I was definitely also very prepared that I would just have to stop, and what I was trying to do just wasn't going to happen, and and we'd just have to return, and I would have to seriously think about Connie's future. So I tried to have very little expectations, because I had no idea how it was all going to work out, to be honest.
So diving into your book now, and of course I don't want to give too much away so that everyone can read it and enjoy it, but so you make it there, you get to the island, and I remember reading in the very beginning, like you said, you're kind of unsupported, you didn't really have plans of places to stay, and I think it was one of your first nights, and you had this really grumpy man sort of ruin your day, let's say. And it was your first night, wasn't it? Or it was
it was the second, yeah.
The second, yeah.
So we'd arrived off the ferry the first night in the pouring rain and gales, and couldn't find anywhere to camp, and then so knocked on a crofter's door, and he was lovely, gave us somewhere to camp, came out with 2 steaming mugs of tea and a donation, bless him. and that all went fine. Next morning, set off to go right down to the south to start the next day. We were going to have a rest day. Connie had actually got really upset that night in the wind and had jumped out of her corral twice. And the second time, I think she must have caught the electrical tape round her leg. She'd actually cut her leg. So we got down, took a few hours drive and another ferry crossing and then another causeway crossing to Battersea. There was a community cafe there. There's lots of people camping kind of on the beach and things. It's really, really beautiful. I asked at the community cafe if it was okay to set up just a small corral and camp the night. And they were like, yeah, of course, really friendly, really nice. So got set up. And this man arrived, a local, and asked what we're up to and things, said he was the grazing clerk for the area. And he wasn't happy at all, obviously didn't like horses, but kind of just explained, I'm just here for the night, I'm setting off tomorrow and I'm doing this fundraiser and things. So eventually he kind of said, oh, that's fine, and off he went. And Connie's leg had swollen up overnight with a cut, so the plan was take her down and take her into the sea, salt water would be great. So me and my friend and Pip headed off with her down to the beach, and next thing we could hear all the shouting and screaming and turned round, and here was the chap back again asking us what on earth we were doing, where we were going. And so I explained, you could see the leg was swollen, and he said, no, I've given you permission just to stay in this one bit, and you're not to move from here, and it was just really weird. There'd been an outbreak of TB on Skye, which is another island, but it's not near the Hebrides, and we hadn't come via Skye, and horses can't carry TB either. So, but he had a real issue and was just really annoyed and angry about life. So we said, right, fine, we'll just stop here and we'll not do anything, and I'll just head off tomorrow morning. And then he came back about half an hour later and said, I've spoken to everyone on the island, and you're not wanted. Nobody wants to hear you to get off the island. And
that's pretty heavy.
It's really heavy stuff. Yeah. I kind of know my access rights in Scotland. I know you're allowed to wild camp. We did have a vehicle, which makes it a little bit different, but there was loads of people camping and things. He obviously really had an issue with the horse. He said we were using up winter grazing for the cattle, and I was trying to explain that her corral is like 10 feet by 10 feet on the whole island, so she's not going to take up winter grazing. But he was just, you couldn't communicate with him, you couldn't get through. So eventually I said, fine, you know what, I will. It was 7 k's to walk off the island to the next island, which just had a causeway. So I said, fine, we'll leave, that's fine. And off he went. So we packed up, and my friend drove the horse box and the car, and I just decided to lead Connie because I thought that's really good. It'll get the swelling down, get some movement going. And Pip just trotted alongside, and he appeared for the 4th time, this time accompanied by his wife, and just screaming and swearing, telling us just to get off the island. And I was trying to say, I'm on a public highway, I have every right to be here, I'm not causing anybody any hassle, nothing. And so they followed us. They parallel with the car the whole way, screaming abuse, until I was absolutely bawling my eyes out. And was kind of banished off the island. And I just thought, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? Is every place going to be like this? Is nobody going to want us camping? Is nobody going to want to see a horse? And yeah, really, really panicked about what I was myself in for.
I mean, myself as well, when I read that, and I was thinking, if I was in your shoes, would I have continued? Oh my gosh, is this a sign? Should I not be doing this? So, you're day 2, you have this guide chasing you off of the island. Not the best way to start this adventure. And, I think lots of people, they think of travel as, I don't know, they see the Instagram photos and they're like, everything's just waterfalls and 5-star hotels. But you have moments like this where, like you said, you're down, you feel like crap, they're making you cry. Why am I doing this? Why am I here? you know,
And you feel responsible for your animals, of course, as well. You know, you've just dragged them into all this. So,
exactly, exactly. And you know, you're kind of like trying to pull yourself together for your animal so that you can continue on this adventure. So, you know, what happens after that? Like the next day, are you just completely deflated, or do you just kind of like, you know what, I'm just gonna take that as one of those things, and I'm just gonna keep aiming for my goal.
yeah, so we ended up that night staying in. So on the way down, when we'd been traveling down with a horse box the day before, we'd stopped at this lovely hotel, and just for a bite to eat. And the gentleman that ran it, who was foreign, he was lovely, really lovely. And we told him all of our plans and things, and he'd actually said, "Oh, if you're passing, stop in, and there's a field there, if you want a corral for the night and things." So we ended up walking to his place that same day. So he was like, "Wow, what, I was expecting you tomorrow night," and we told him the story, and he was appalled. And he told some of his staff in the hotel, and quite a few people came up and said that's not how we welcome people in the Hebrides, and they were appalled by his behaviour, and they really gave me a boost. And throughout the trip, I could not have been more welcome every single place I went. Thankfully, it was a complete one-off. Just really unfortunate it was at the very start that it really worried me. But no, when people read what had happened, they were disgusted by him, absolutely disgusted by him. And it's certainly not the welcome you'd expect anywhere in Scotland, but especially the islands. The people in the islands are renowned for their hospitality and things. And it's, one of my kind of lasting memories of the entire trip latterly is the people, and the warmth and the generosity that I felt. So thankfully, they the people at the hotel kind of encouraged me to keep going, and kind of pointed out that that it shouldn't happen again. So that was good and gave me a bit of a boost.
So you start your adventure. I guess your friend, like you said, started for a couple of days helping you, and then suddenly you're on your own. Let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what's it like? You're with your horse and your dog, and you're just going somewhere.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. See, my friend Ruth, she left on the next day, on day 3. Back to the mainland. So she'd kind of left my horse box with supplies a little bit further north for me to find it in a few days' time. And we just set off. The next couple of days were amazing tracks. It's called the Macher. The Macher refers to the kind of wildflowers that grow just on the Hebrides. It's to do with the sandy soil and the fact that there's no pesticides and things used farming there. So it's a very natural environment. So we had 2 days of the most beautiful sandy tracks and beaches. We hardly saw anybody. So we were just, in our own kind of little world. And Connie had a few times of really misbehaving. We came to this bridge one day on the 3rd day. And she started to go up in the air, so I got off and she wouldn't even lead over it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I doing again? And then after like half an hour of having a tantrum, she just walks across it like, she's done it every day of her life. And
so you just sat down and said, you know what, we have nothing better to do today.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, we are going north, so we are going north. That is the only object. And yeah, at kind of dusk or when, if the weather's bad, just looking for somewhere to camp. So obviously you had to find somewhere nice that had good grass for Connie, but also somewhere that was dry and not a complete bog for the tent. And that was really nice because, Connie kind of knew the day was over, everything, all the panniers came off, and Pip, she's a collie, so she's completely, obsessed with collecting bits of heather and sticks and running around. And, you put Connie in the corral and get the stove on, and I'm always desperate for a cup of tea. And you have no agenda, it's not, you don't have to be anywhere by a certain time. Nobody's expecting you. And it was just nice. It was really quiet, and just absorbed in your own kind of day-to-day things. You you see things that maybe you don't normally notice, even on a hack, because you might be trotting or cantering, and because she was carrying her panniers, we only ever walked. So we got closer to wildlife, and just it was just a really kind of quiet existence. So the first few days were a test, because her behaviour was what had been quite normal up to then, which was often not too pleasant.
Well, I like you just sort of, I don't know if you meant it, but I'm a horse coach, and a lot of people, they have this idea of, oh, I just got off of work and I have an hour before football starts, or, whatever it is. And so they go to the stables and they're like, okay, I have an hour. So, they expect that their horse can do all this stuff. And, sort of like what you said, I have nothing to do today except cross this bridge.
Yeah.
if it takes all day, or, if we camp here, whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. And you just kind of, like you said, no agenda, you're just in the moment, and it's suddenly, you're on the horse's time, you're on the time of nature, the sun, and I think it's an important message for people to just slow down and like not be on their time.
Yeah.
So did you, so you start this and you're kind of finding your rhythm. When did you start feeling like Connie was, I don't know, enjoying it, or starting to, I think, see you as part of her herd, maybe?
Yeah, I'd say probably day 5. She started, and it became a daily occurrence. At dawn, she would come to the tent and start pawing right outside the tent, like pawing excessively. And it was almost to say, it's another day. We're going somewhere else today. Get up. I want to start going. So that was really nice. And the other thing is, I'd lay out all the panniers, start, taking everything down, getting ready. And certainly by the end of the first week, she'd actually come and stand at her panniers. So she was waiting to get saddled up. And the second you clipped that lead rope on her, she would march off, like she was so enthused to be, to experience the new day. She had started kind of less of the I call it antsy, the kind of, highly strung, kind of tantrumy behaviours, and less provoked by something like a scary bridge. And I think day 4 we camped. There's a lovely, it's called the Gatliff Foundation. They have youth hostels, independent youth hostels, as a charity on the islands, and although we weren't allowed inside to stay over because I had the dog, they allowed us to camp in their grounds and use the facilities. And loads of people came out and spoke to me and to Connie and Pip. And I think then she kind of realised that she was going somewhere new every night, and I was always with her, and obviously Pip was always with her. And I could start kind of leading her. Before, if you'd led her, if you walked in front of her, she'd often barge over the top of you, despite doing loads of groundwork and things. If she got a fright, she would just knock you over. But she kind of started walking at my side. So there was definite improvements by kind of, it's probably as soon as day 4 or 5, kind of smaller improvements anyway.
And did you have a moment in this trip where you felt really, I don't know, surprised by her, or did you have that moment where you're like, yes, this is exactly why I came here, this is what I wanted, that you had that success? Yeah,
I guess, I'm trying to think, it's probably about day 9 or 10, we'd met this lovely old gentleman, an old crofter, and we'd passed the time of day with him. It was lovely, and he'd said, I own all the fields you'll see for the next hour, so just pick one and camp. Lovely old chap. So I chose this field that had running water in it, and it was a huge field. It had sheep in it, but he told me it was secure, so it was fine. And it was awful weather actually that night, so I camped quite quickly and got into the tent and things. That's my dog squeaking its toy. I'm just going to grab. Well, thank you, Pip. It's always toy time if you're a collie. And then the next morning I got up, and despite having like a 5-10 acre field, she hadn't gone for further than maybe 15-20 feet from the tent. And I think it was then that I realised, you haven't left the kind of herd, I guess. You wanted to be close to us all night. And just things like when I did walk her, I would throw the rope over her neck, and it was just a complete, do it and just keep walking and just trust. And she would just start to follow. I didn't actually have to lead her. There was nothing physically attached. And sometimes she'd get a bit behind because she'd maybe start grazing, and I would just keep walking and hope. And she would always start to trot and catch up, whereas before she would have just turned for home and just taken off. So yeah, it was, I guess, kind of day 10, 11. It was like, you want to be here and you want to be with me. And you're seeing us as part of your herd. So, after that point, she only bit me once the rest of the trip, which is, was an improvement. So yeah, that was probably the defining moment of this actually might work, and I might go home with a horse that I feel likes me.
And that must have felt really amazing. I mean, all of this stuff that you had gone through, all these programs you paid for, all these videos you watched, and here you are 10 days and you're seeing results. I can imagine that must have made you feel lighter.
Yeah. It was my last ditch attempt at trying to reach her. So, I was, feeling that was working. And just, I love travel. I love being out there with nature, and just to add a horse into that. I'd done a couple of horseback rides overseas, 2 or 3 days trips or a week in Mongolia. But I think to be with your own animals, and just that really slow pace of life, I guess it really started to affect me as well. I met some quite a lot of elderly people who talked about when the horses used to take the kids to school, like 2 or 3 on the horse's back, and they'd take them to school, and then they'd bring the horse back, and it'd spend a day taking in the peat, which they cut for heating, or ploughing the fields, and then they'd go back, pick up the kids, and there's now not a lot of ponies left on the Hebrides. There's just some kind of riding ponies and Eriskay ponies, which are a kind of endangered native breed. So they were delighted to see horses back on the islands as well, and it was really nice to just be able to spend the time of day with people and not think, I'm about to do this, or I need to, miss the traffic going home, or somebody's expecting you, or you have to do something and go shopping or whatever. It was just nice to be able to spend time when you wanted to. So yeah.
I also thought it was quite funny in your book because you had this horse box, and it's like you always somehow managed to find someone who was friendly and would give you a lift to the horse box. I guess that's something that you can't really plan, but you seem to always find someone.
Yeah. I was never sure how it would work, and I thought I'll have to get buses or taxis or summer lift. I thought I would hitch lifts to go back and get the horse box, and I never did. Every 4 or 5 days, people would always ask what you're up to and things, and ask if you were just no support, and I'd say, well, there's a horse box with dry clothes, and it's down here, and people were so generous. Sometimes it was like a 4 or 5 hour round trip for people. So about every 4 or 5 days, I would go down, pick the horse box up, drive it to where I was, and get fresh supplies and things, and then set off again. So that worked really well. So I guess we were supported in that way, but it was nice to have some fresh supplies and things every 4 or 5 days. So.
And how does it work with the islands? Because I'm not very familiar. So you went on how many islands, and how does that work? So you have to cross the ferry in your horse box every time, and how big are the islands? And
we went across 13 in total. And many of them have causeways, so almost like bridges that are built on earth, so they're all built up, or just bridges. So some of them are tiny, literally. Grimsey, we touched on it for maybe half a mile before the next bridge or causeway. So whereas some of the bigger islands like Lewis and Harris in the north are big islands. So we did 5 ferries in total. So again, I'd get somebody to take me to pick up the horse box, get to the ferry point, cross over with the ferry and then just head off again. And thankfully, I'd never had a horse on a ferry before, and it didn't help on the way over, which was a kind of 4-hour ferry trip, that one of the Calmac ferry guys said, oh, the last time we had a horse crossing, it broke out of the horse, but it kicked its way out of the horse box and cut itself really badly. I was like, well, thanks for that, telling me that now. But they let you go down accompanied to see the horse down in the hold. And she was actually really happy. She was just eating her hay net. So I was lucky none of the crossings were too choppy. So I'm terrible on ferries, so I was a bit green, but it certainly never seemed to affect Connie. So some are really, really small, and others are quite big, and they're all, the southern half of the Hebrides are so different to the northern half. The kind of northern half is mostly water. When you look at it on the map, the roads are kind of, there's just small areas of water everywhere, whereas on the south it's much more kind of like mountainous and it's just really, really geographically very, very different, but beautiful, and beautiful golden beaches. I wondered if I'd get fed up of seeing all the beaches, but I never did. They were all lovely.
And you said you had definitely, I'm sure you had multiple magical days, but there was definitely one where you said you rode Connie on one of the islands. I think you guys were basically on your own.
Yeah.
Do you want to share that story with us?
Yeah, so there's an uninhabited island called Valley, and I guess it's about 2/3 of the way through the trip. It's a beautiful island. It has been inhabited. There's an old ancient mansion house that's just kind of become ruinous, but it's still got like all the old fireplaces, each of which are different, and it's been a big mansion. And the old farm and steadings and things, but it gets cut off, so you can only get across in low tide, when the tide's all out. And then the tide comes in, and you are, on your complete own desert island. So again, did a lot of research, spoke to, there's a little community riding school close by, so they gave me the tides and gave me the route across and things. So rode out. It was quite nerve-wracking to think, once the tide is in, you have no, assistance whatsoever when you're there if anything did go wrong. But it was the highlight of the trip. The island is just magical. So we got across, dumped all my kit, and then I actually just jumped on Connie bareback and we went exploring. There's lovely little coves, there's beaches, there's sandy tracks, and at one point I jumped off her and just let her go, and she actually took off down this little hill, and I thought, oh well, we're on an island surrounded by the sea, so she can't go anywhere. But actually she just stopped at a patch of grass, and I sat and she grazed, and then I went and got on her back again, and she was fine. And the afternoon we went back and had lunch, and Pip never stops. Like, she never ever rests until you literally put her in the tent. That's the only time she'll lie down. But I have a great black and white picture of them both, with Pip just lying flat out snoozing, and Connie with the head down sleeping as well. So I think there's something magical on the island that does something that just makes you just stop and breathe. It was by far the highlight of the trip. It was just gorgeous.
It sounds like every girl's fantasy. The whole black stallion galloping with your horse on the beach, and no, it sounds great.
It was.
So, touching on Pip a little bit, some people I think might think it's either a burden having your dog with you on these horsey travels, or maybe it's I don't know, better because you have that companionship, and then obviously you're a solo lady traveling on your own. So what's your experience and your take on traveling with a horse, and then also having the dog in the mix?
Pip and I have done thousands of miles together. So we kind of have our camping down to a fine art. I guess she knows the process as well as I do. to me, it was unusual having the horse. That was the kind of different thing to add to the equation, in terms of finding grass and things for overnight. But, she's, I think I'd only travel with a well-behaved dog, so she's never on the lead. The roads, did get quite busy at some points, but I just know that she just absolutely knows that she has to stay behind Connie. And when I'm riding, she's deaf, but she knows hand signals, so I can tell her where to go just by pointing, and she'll move. There was only one occasion I hadn't heard a car come up behind, and Pip was toodling behind me, and I was riding, and it wasn't until it peeped and I turned round because I didn't hear it in the wind, and Pip was just trotting in front of the car, completely oblivious to the car behind her. And we all had high vis kind of things on as well. But yeah, for me, I wouldn't travel without a dog, but it has to be a well-trained dog. So, you've never any concerns about them chasing sheep or, I don't know, being aggressive with other dogs or running off or anything like that. So, she's a very, very good companion. And certainly, in the tent, if there was wet days and we had, a long time in the tent, it's a great companion. The wet dog smell in the tent isn't such a nice experience. But if she can put up with me smelling, I can put up with her wet dog smell occasionally. So no, it was lovely having her there.
So how is things now? You guys had this adventure, this awesome trip. What's the fairy tale ending that I want to hear?
Yeah, the fairy tale ending is that Connie is a completely different horse. I say that a part of her soul resides in mine, and vice versa. She is awesome. She would follow me to the moon and back, I think, if I asked now. She doesn't rear. If anything, if she gets really kind of anxious, her head will come up, but she doesn't rear. She follows me unled most of the time, and she's just so much more relaxed. She trusts me if I do something that she hasn't done before. She's like, okay, right, I'll try and I'll do it and things. Whereas before she'd just, have a meltdown. She's not bitten me at all since halfway through the trip was the last time she bit me. And that's 2 years now I've been back. We now do one-day eventing. We still do our long-distance rides and things. And she is, you could offer me £1 million for her and I wouldn't sell her, whereas before the trip, I would have given you money to take her off my hands. So it is a fairy tale ending, and the trip literally did save her life. So yeah, it worked, thankfully.
And do you have any adventures planned for the future with Connie or other horses or?
Yeah, so a year ago I got a Spanish Mustang. So his first generation mum was a wild Mustang from Montana. From Arizona, not Montana. And unfortunately, as a 6-year-old, I found out since that he's had like 15 homes. He's a bronc, so he was kind of unrideable and major issues. So the plan is he is a pack pony and it will come out and do that, but I'd also like to make him into a riding pony. So I'm working quite hard with him just now, and hopefully next year, before Pip gets really too old, I'd like to do a kind of 1,000-mile around Scotland, some of the old drove trails, and yeah, just kind of travel around again. I got the real blues when I came back. The mortgages still need paid and the bills need paid, and I had to go back to work, and people expect you to be here in certain times and all. So I would do anything to go back to traveling again. So yeah, that is the plan, to work away with him over winter, and then swap them kind of day about riding and pack pony and do another big trip.
Wow, so many grand adventures. It's funny that you mentioned that you got this Mustang, or I guess that's the next level after Connie.
Yeah, and I was really naive, thinking, I've had one like project horse that I've fixed, and he was like, oh really, so he has a completely new set of issues and problems, and him and Connie are polars apart. I call him the punk and the princess. So I am now learning a whole new, different way of working with trying to get him on board. So my knowledge level is is definitely increasing, and they're testing me. He tests me daily, but it's I think the relationship I now have with Connie is just amazing. That I hope to kind of develop that with him as well, and hopefully he'll be here as life with me, and have a good relationship like Connie and I do. So that's the plan.
And what would you say if someone wanted to do something similar, or maybe they have a horse which is, I don't know, they're having some issues, or they're unsuitable, or whatever it is, what kind of advice would you give for someone in that situation? And then how does in the grand scheme of things, do you think that these type of adventures, is that, you've done it once, you're doing it again with another horse, is that something that you genuinely would recommend for people?
I think certainly the issues that my two have come with, which are definitely human-made issues. So my Mustang with 15 owners, he doesn't know how to behave because different people have had different expectations and taught him differently. So he is very ambivalent. And Connie, I think, probably deep down was very fearful and very untrusting. So I think for those types of horses, if you can, and obviously safety is an issue, but if you can do something like I've done, I think it definitely helps. I guess it very much depends on the issue you have with your horses. I will say don't give up. There's been many days and nights that I've been in tears when I've phoned friends and said I can't do it, that I have to give up and, question my sanity. I've had people kind of question my sanity, but I guess it's just don't give up. If you can see something there that's worth fighting for, then try. And it does, it takes an awful lot of time and patience and commitment. But I think the bond I now have with Connie outweighs anything that I ever put in. She gives me way more than what I put in now. So yeah, if you can. Yeah, definitely go for it.
And do you have any advice for people that, I don't know, might just be interested in going on an adventure with their horse in general? Like you said, I want that beach moment with my horse. So what's your advice to somebody that hasn't really started long distance unsupported horse rides and they're looking into doing something like that?
Yeah, I think the main thing is anyone can do it. There's nothing special about me or my pony or anything. It's just the desire to do something. I think, start with short overnights, maybe just 2-day treks, and don't go too far or too remote, and just build up your experience. See what equipment works for you, what doesn't. Some people sleep, and are really warm people and hardly need a sleeping bag. Others are really cold. So you have to try and make it as comfortable as possible for yourself, but there will be hardships as well. And, the animals always had to come first. So I was always last kind of to dry out and things. But I think, yeah, anyone can do it. And I think the experiences you get from it and just going back to that simple life, is just wonderful. And having I think if you can have no set agenda, it helps. I think if I had pre-booked lots of things, I would have spent the days stressing about maybe running late, or was I on the right path, or something. So for me, it was I really enjoyed not having a kind of set agenda. And if you're worried about going out by yourself, then get a friend to come along, and they don't even have to be on the horse. They can come on a mountain bike or walk or something, and just to give you a bit of extra confidence. But yeah, definitely recommend it if you fancy doing it, to go and give it a try.
And how can people follow you or find you or find your book? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so we have a Facebook page called the Daft and The Ditsy. So Pip is obviously the deaf one, and I think I was the daft, and Connie is the ditzy, which means just a completely mad. So we have a Facebook page, and yeah, I kept a journal when I was there, mostly for my own sanity in the tent. I just wrote down every day where I'd been and how it had gone and what had happened. So when I came back, I put that into a short book, which I sell. So I should probably say that I've raised £6,500 so far. I think the trip raised about £5,000 by the end. And then I've been given some talks, and then all the proceeds from the books go to charity as well. So the Riding for Disabled got £5,000, and then the dog rescue where I got Pip got £1,000, and then since then about every £150 that I raise goes to different animal charities. So the books are £5. If anybody wants a copy, they can just contact me through the Facebook page.
Amazing. That is definitely amazing. £6,000 raised.
6.5, yeah.
£6,500 because of your adventure.
Yep. So that's been a real positive thing as well. I kind of thought, I might raise £1,500 or something. People were phenomenally generous in the Hebrides. I set up a Just Giving page as well and the Facebook page, but people were just so generous. It was humbling. I think if I had to sum up the entire experience in one word, it was humbling, both in terms of the relationship I developed with Connie, but also just with people. Other than the horrible man at the start, people were just phenomenally generous with things like hot mugs of tea and sausages for the dog to money and things. So yeah, it was a humbling experience.
Yeah, I think that is great, and I definitely appreciated your story, and I read your book, as I mentioned at the beginning, and it's very inspiring, and I'm actually somewhat doing an adventure as well myself in Ireland, and I definitely agree with what you said about how you build this relationship with your horse that I feel you can't really do that in an arena. You can a little bit, but I think stuff comes out when it's just you and your horse and you're all day and you're on the road and you're overcoming these challenges. And I think it's great. I think it's great what you did.
Yeah, no, we had an absolute ball. And yeah, I'm having fun hearing about and following your adventures in Ireland just now as well. So I think we had similar weather.
Yes, I'm Californian, so I'm adjusting still, though. Yeah, I'm not as rainproof as my horses. But yeah, so thank you. I will actually share a link for your Facebook page in the show notes. So anyone listening, you can just go and click on the link and you can find and definitely message her and order a copy of her book. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed your stories. I'm sorry it has to end, actually. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the Equestrian Adventuresses podcast. Please subscribe to our channel and check out our website, equestrianadventuresses.com, for links to the show notes. Leave us a review and consider becoming a premium member for bonus episodes and footage. More information can be found on our website. Until next time, Adventuresses, happy trails.